Absolutely, goddess. For every problem, absolutely, goddess. For every problem that we have as African people, we have to first put a Band-Aid on it to slow the bleeding. But Band-Aids are not solutions. We have to create solutions. And so the Black Parent Advocate book, it's a Band-Aid because the solution is independent educational institutions for our children. But in lieu of that, our parents in St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, the United States, and other U.S. territories, they have to be equipped with the knowledge necessary to protect our children from the exploitative special education system, the parasitic mental health system. And so with Black Parent Advocate, I give parents the tools and weapons they need in order to protect their children from misdiagnosing or poorly conducted psychological evaluations or unfair discipline practices, making sure they understand the psychological evaluation and the IEP and the pre-referral intervention program, making sure they understand what is autism by definition and how does a child qualify for special education services, be it for autism or speech and language or deafness or blindness or traumatic brain injury or the intellectual disability, the orthopedic impairment, and things of that nature. So I try to take this terminology, this technical world of education and mental health and psychology, and break it down in such a way that parents can understand it and also practically apply the techniques that are written in my book. So I'm very proud of the book because I think it's going to save a lot of our mothers and fathers some headache when it comes to saving our children. Now on the other side, so that's my Band-Aid. The books are the Band-Aids. The school is the solution. And so with the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy, and I do want to take this time to invite all my brothers and sisters in the U.S. Virgin Islands and across the Caribbean, the entire African family for that matter, throughout the diaspora, to come and be with us this Kwanzaa. We are planning our community grand opening of the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy. And I do want to say thank you to all the brothers and sisters in St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, across the Caribbean and across the world who have stood by me these past 9 years as we went up and down and through holy hell to get this school purchased and renovated. And we are at the 11:55 mark of the clock. Just a few more minutes and the school will be ready. So I want to say thank you because we do regularly get donations from St. Thomas. We get donations from St. Croix. We get donations from across the Caribbean. And so the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy will probably go down in history as the first school in the world that was totally financed by African people from every continent and probably every country. I will need to double check, but if I'm not mistaken, we have gotten a donation from an African in every country in the world. We may be missing a couple, of course, Europe in the Arab world, but outside of that, every African country, every Central and South American country, every island, I believe we have received donations from. So I want to say thank you for that. Now, the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy is a leadership institution because we believe that we need leaders in the Black community. And at a time where so many men are trying to scapegoat Black women for our failures as the natural born leaders of our community, I think it's time that we have a school that teaches boys how to be men and greater than that, how to be leaders. And so we are very serious about teaching leadership. You know, many schools have leadership in their title. You know, I've worked at schools that have had leadership in their title. I've been principal at schools that have had leadership in their titles, but they don't really teach leadership. None of the schools that I've been associated with that had leadership in their title ever taught a leadership course. So we will teach leadership as a course. We will be the first school in history that will teach the philosophy of the Honorable Marcus Garvey as a course. We will also teach the philosophy and the works of the Honorable Frederick Douglass as a course. Pan-Africanism will be a course. But in addition to science, math, language, and civics, the 6 core sciences that will underscore our curriculum will be agricultural and agronomical science. Our children will have a farm, and we will teach them how to grow their own food. I have identified 2 Black-owned farms, one in Maryland and one in Delaware, that have agreed to work with us with our agricultural curriculum and with our agricultural program. And our children will be taking excursions to those Black farms and others across the American continent so they can learn on deck, in person, firsthand, how to become professional farmers. Also, there will be agricultural and agronomical curriculum. This is where they learn how to prepare their food. They learn how to measure the nutritional content of the food. This is the eat to live aspect of our curriculum. We want them to be baby Dr. Sabies. We want them to be masters of naturopathic medicine and holistic health. And then there will be political and military science. Military science, we will teach them African martial arts. There will also be a Marcus Garvey Frederick Douglass gun club. They will get their first gun from the school. There will be gun training for our babies. And political science will teach them about the world in which they live that they may one day have to fight in. So why is Africa in the condition that she's in? Why is transgenderism being pushed on prepubescent children who are not even old enough to understand what sex is? Why is Africa the most minerally rich continent in the world, but its people are in the poorest condition? How did Jesus become white? Why were most of our great Black leaders assassinated? This is part of the political science curriculum, because although we need history is critical. We also need political science, understanding the world in which they live in today. A child who is historically conscious but politically stupid is going to be of no benefit to the community. Likewise, a child who is politically conscious and historically stupid will be no good to the community. So we have to make sure they have an understanding of our historical greatness as a people, but that they also have a firm understanding on the contemporary issues that African people are facing in this world. And then we move over to the African spiritual and cosmological curriculum. Our school has a spiritual foundation, and the primary spiritual modality through which we will teach the high sciences of African culture will be Ifa, the system that I personally practice, which comes from the Yoruba kingdom of Nigeria. And so Ifa will be the foundational spiritual system of the FDMG Academy. Children are not forced to practice the culture. So if they are Christians or Muslims or Hebrews or whatever their religion, we will respect their parents' right for them not to participate in any of the activities, but they must learn the system. If a parent is not comfortable with their son learning the system of Ifa and learning the history of traditional African spirituality, then they cannot attend the school. No child can be exempt from any aspect of our curriculum. And then we move over to the economic and financial curriculum number 5. And these are in no particular order. With the economic and financial curriculum, we're going to teach our children the laws of money, investing, the stock market, real estate, business planning. We are going to be very, very serious about the economic aspect of our institution, because we as Black people are in the condition we in partly because we don't have the resources we need in order to empower our fellow brothers and sisters. So we need economics, we need resources, we need money in order to help our people. So we are very, very serious about making sure our young men understand all the various modalities that are available to them as it relates to making money. And we want to tie those economic opportunities to agriculture. We want to tie that to military industrial complex. We want to tie that to the healthcare industry, which is making trillions of dollars off of Black people, but is not curing a single problem that we have. So we want to show our young men, yes, you can become economically successful, but you can do it by serving the needs of your people. You don't have to become rich by being an exploiter or a practicer of the capitalistic system of economics. And then the last curriculum that we have will be the science of the Black man, woman, and child. And this is going to be critical because this is the manhood aspect of what we are doing. We want to teach our young men how to be fathers, how to be uncles, how to be sons, how to be leaders, how to be organizers, how to be activists, how to be revolutionary Pan-African nationalists. And so that, in a nutshell, is the curriculum for the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. And I do want to say, brothers and sisters who have more questions about the school, come on out tomorrow. Arian's Restaurant. Dr. Umar will be there in the flesh. Come on out, 103 Sub-Base Road. And if you are interested in employment at the school, send me your resume. And you can email your resume to fdmgresumes@gmail.com. Again, that's fdmgresumes@gmail.com. Make sure you include a photo of yourself as well as a cover letter, which tells us who you are and why you would like to work at the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. Who you are and why you would like to work at the school. And to that point, I also want to say that we will, within a few years after opening, God willing, we will have a virtual school platform. So for young brothers here in St. Thomas and St. Croix and St. John who can't come to the school physically, they'll be able to wake up in the morning, sign in on their laptop, and they will virtually be present in the class, meaning they can see their classmates, see the teacher, and the teacher and classmates can see them. So we are working on a virtual school program for those who cannot physically be at the school. But it is my wish and my dream and my desire, my mission, my goal, and my hope for us to build a Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy right here in St. Thomas, another one in St. Croix, another one in Jamaica, another one in the Bahamas, another one in Bermuda, another one in Nigeria, another one in Australia, another one in London. We want them all over the world. My contribution to the Pan-African struggle is to build independent schools for our children all over the universe. I want to be the superintendent of the first truly revolutionary Pan-Africanist global school system for African children. I disagree with that logic. It is historically incorrect. It is anthropologically incorrect. It is biologically incorrect. It is genetically incorrect. It is ancestrally incorrect. African people are the first people on the planet Earth. And every other human family, except possibly the European, descends directly from us. If we do not leave Africa, no other race evolves from us. We would still be the only people on this planet if we never left Africa. For those who say we were in America before slavery, they are correct. We were in America before slavery because we were everywhere before slavery. We're the oldest people. We were on the planet by ourselves for tens of thousands of years before any other race evolved from us. So we're the first people in America. We're the first people in the Caribbean. We're the first people in Europe. We're the first people in Asia. So yes, we were here. When you read the diaries of Christopher Columbus, he talks of seeing African people, black skin, woolly hair, just like the ones he saw in Africa. Let us remember that Christopher Columbus did not discover. Christopher Columbus spent time in West Africa, and if memory serves me correctly, he spent approximately 2 weeks in the 𝚂𝚄𝙱𝚂𝙺 slave dungeon, during which time he was given a map that showed him how to get over to the so-called New World. He was educated about the three major currents that flow from the West African coast over to North America, South America, and then the Caribbean. And so all he had to do was catch the sea current to the direction that he wanted to go. Oh, yes, he had several Africans who were on board with him. And of course, absolutely. And some people would call them Moors, but Moor means black, so we also have to pay attention to all these different names that they give to African people to try to make us think they were not African people. But yes, he had African people who were there with him. And he took the third current, the bottom current, that brought him to the Caribbean islands. So it was not a mistake. It was not an accident. It was not a discovery. He was simply following the instructions that were given to him by Africans who had already circumnavigated the planet. We were the first people on the ocean. Yes, it's true. The Portuguese had a golden age of maritime science, and the Chinese had a golden age of maritime science. But people forget that the Africans were the first with the golden age of maritime science, because if we were not the first in shipping, how did we get all around the world? Because we definitely did not swim. So getting back to your question, we were here before Columbus. So yes, you have pre-Columbian Africans in America. You have post-Columbian Africans in America. The issue that we have with brothers and sisters who are miseducating our children and our people, telling them that they didn't come from Africa, is the fact that everybody came from Africa. And it is ridiculous for the people who look the most like Africans to be the only ones in the world who would dare say we don't come from Africa. We all come from Africa, but we can't get distracted by this type of propaganda and incorrect rhetoric, because we've always had to deal with this as American Africans and throughout the diaspora. You know, when you look at the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and after his deportation from America in 1927, many of the organizations who came after Garvey also propagated to our people that they were not African. All due respect to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he taught our people that they were not African, that they were Asiatics. All due respect to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, he taught our people that they were not African, that they were Asiatic. So we have a history of black leaders coming before our people and basically distracting them from their Africanity. Again, all these black men did great things, but they also continued to put forth the untruth that we were not an African people. So we have to deal with that. And this is rooted in self-hate. This is rooted in psychological homelessness. This is rooted in African racial low self-esteem. And I also think it might even be rooted in a CIA scheme to brainwash black people into thinking that they were already here so they can do away with concepts such as reparations. They can do away with concepts such as repatriation. They can do away with concepts such as global unification of all African people, because there are some very clear and very powerful ramifications for this type of dangerous and senseless rhetoric. But now that we have DNA testing, we don't have to debate who is and who isn't from Africa. Roll up your sleeve, give some blood, send it to the land, send it to the lab. And when it comes back, let's see if it says you're anything other than an African. But the other point I want to make, that I think some of these pretendians, because this is what I call them, good sister, pretendians, because they're pretending to be Indians. Here's the thing. The 5 major Native American tribes fought with the Confederacy to maintain slavery. All 5 of the major North American tribes were slave owners themselves. So when an American African tells you, I'm a Cherokee, I'm a Choctaw, I'm a Seminole, I'm a Creek, what exactly are they saying? Are you saying that you were a slave of the Seminole, a slave of the Choctaw, a slave of the Chickasaw? And if you were a slave of a Native American tribe, how is that any better than being a slave to a white man? And still further, even if your mother was raped by a Chickasaw slave master, why would you be proud of that? But let's go a step further, and I'll stop with this point here. We have 4 grandparents. We have 8 great-grandparents. We have 16 great-great-grandparents. And we have 32 great-great-great-grandparents. If one of your great-great-great-grandparents, one of 32, was a Native American, how does that disqualify all of your African blood, and now you become 100% Native American? How is that possible? And why are you dismissing all of your African DNA to lay claim to 1/32nd of your so-called Native American DNA? It's all self-hatred. Sure. Good question. It is true that within the political and philosophical history of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, we have had a split. We have had a nationalist versus socialist split, and we still have a nationalist versus socialist split within the world and ranks of Pan-Africanism. There are those who have a leaning or an orientation to Marxism, as you mentioned, and socialism. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, he was of that energy. Kwame Nkrumah, after he met W.E.B. Du Bois and George Padmore and others, he became C.L.R. James. He became more of that persuasion. So you have had your socialists. Patrice Lumumba was not. Patrice Lumumba was straight up and down nationalist. Amilcar Cabral had socialist leanings. Robert Sobukwe of South Africa, straight up and down nationalist, Pan-African nationalist. I am a straight up and down Pan-African nationalist, as was the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. So you do have both of those camps, and that is a debate and a philosophical difference that we will always have. But what we try to do as Pan-Africanists is we try to, as much as we can, although it can't totally be done, is we try to minimize the difference of ideological approach between nationalists and socialists, and we try to unite as much as possible around the central goal of Pan-Africanism, which is the total unification and liberation of African people. But I do not support Pan-African communism or socialism. I don't think Karl Marx or Friedrich Engels or anyone else, Joseph Stalin or any of the rest of them, had anything that I feel I need to make use of in the struggle to liberate African people. As I often tell people, I am not a capitalist or a communist. I am a Pan-Africanist.
No, the reason why I'm here is to, again, to ask our people to come down and question and listen and learn more from Dr. Umar. Like I said, is that these are educational series, and we need to learn the truth, because only the truth could set us free. One thing I notice about our people, we live on beliefs and not truth, especially when it comes to religion and different things like that. Belief, while there is historical truth to the formation of a lot of these doctrines and religious personality that they follow, that they refuse to research to understand why some of these personality was created, and they were created for the purpose of subjugating us as a people. But we continue to go on beliefs instead of doing our research. Dr. Umar and others have done that, and we want you all to come out tomorrow and listen to what they're saying.
Great question. We have to understand something. The only reason why people would even begin to consider capitalism as a viable economic system of liberation is because slavery gave capitalism a 500-year head start over any other modern economic system. We were the first capital in capitalism, and African people need to understand that. The enslaved African was the first capital in capitalism. So when you force people to work 4 or 5 centuries for free, and you build up wealth off of their backs, which gives birth to an industrial revolution, and you use that to tout how economically intelligent you are, it's very fraudulent, because it was slavery that made capitalism what capitalism is. So along with 𝚂𝚁𝙺𝚂𝚲𝙱𝚴, Malcolm X, fellow Pan-Africanist, child of the Garvey movement, I would agree. Capitalism has no solutions in it for black people. But what we have amongst us is we have capitalist-minded neo-Negroes who try to seduce black people into thinking that imitating the white man's economic system offers some hope for black economic liberation. And that is totally dishonest. It is opportunistic. It has no evidence to support it. Capitalism has never saved anybody. It didn't save Europe. It didn't save Asia. It didn't save Africa. Capitalism is not a system that one uses to liberate. Capitalism is the exploitation of the many by the few. Capitalism seeks to make 99% of the world the dependency of the 1% of the world. In America, we have about 100 Europeans who own more wealth than everybody else in the country. Than everybody else in the country. And globally, there's about 1,000 people who own more wealth than the rest of the world put together. That is capitalism. How can anyone believe that a system as exploitative, selfish, and unfair as that can be used to liberate African people? Capitalism cannot be on the table of discussion if we're talking liberation economics. As far as the privatization of industry, I believe that everything should be nationalized, or at least should be considered to be nationalized, unless the government has a rationale that would justify why any of the major industries are in the hands of private citizens. And I would dare argue that nobody but a capitalist would want to put critical industries in the hands of private citizens. For example, why is food in the hands of private citizens? Okay. Why is healthcare in the hands of private citizens? Why is water in the hands of private citizens? Anything that is critically necessary for the survival of humanity should never be privatized. Because when you privatize food, when you privatize land, when you privatize agriculture, when you privatize water, when you privatize medical health care, you are in essence giving individuals control over the lives of others. And I don't support that.
I would just like to add in here that, as far as we are concerned, there's basically, as far as we are concerned, there's basically two types of economic system. One controlled by a minority, or the one controlled by the majority. And capitalism is controlled by the minority. And if you see that, you can understand why we are experiencing so much difficulties in our lives as people all around the world.
In the add to what my elder just said, the European has done an excellent job. He has done a marvelous job convincing black people globally that capitalism can actually work. And so you have black people. Oh, go ahead. Okay, no, that's the call. He has convinced black people that capitalism can actually work. But when you look closely at capitalism, you can see that capitalism gives rise to poverty.
That's right.
You can't be capitalist and not believe in poverty. Because in order for the rich to get rich, they have to exploit people's labor at a low cost. If there is not a large exploitable class of cheap labor, there is no capitalism. And that's why you can always find poor people a stone's throw away from the richest businesses and corporations in any country, because capitalism is the mother of poverty. And keep in mind, all of the dysfunctional major institutions that we live under globally as African people are products or byproducts of capitalism. Mass incarceration is one of the biggest byproducts of capitalism. Why? Because capitalism is all about what? Maximum gain, minimum costs. So that means people are being laid off. I mean, look at what we've seen. Microsoft is laying off thousands. McDonald's was always a place you can go and get a job, although the food isn't worth anything nutritiously, but you could always get a job. McDonald's is laying people. Walmart is laying people off. And now that you have artificial intelligence, you talk about an economic holocaust. What are our people supposed to do when they find robots that can take over half the jobs that we are now working at to feed our families? Artificial intelligence is going to create the same problem for African people that slavery created for the European working class. And that is, white men during slavery cannot feed their families. And one of the biggest reasons for the abolitionist movement was not to free black people, because white folks didn't care about us, whether they was rich or poor. But white men needed work, and they saw the slave as the barrier to them being able to take care of their families. So when you study the origins of the abolitionist movement, it was not out of righteousness or religion. It was not out of a concern for the humanity of the slave. The abolitionist movement grew out of an economic necessity for white men to find work. And as long as slave labor was producing everything that the colonies needed, white men couldn't get work. Artificial intelligence is going to create the same issue. And see, here's the central contradiction of capitalism. Capitalism is a system of greed. Greed by any means necessary. And the problem with greedy people is they don't know when to stop being greedy. And so ultimately what happens is the very system that you create is designed to destroy itself, because you go so far that the people who have to buy your cheap goods at high prices can't even find a job anymore to buy the stuff that you are making. That is exactly what gave rise to the dollar store. That's why you have dollar stores all across America now. I don't know if you have them here in the islands. Why? Because they produce all this stuff and there's nobody who can buy it. So then you just pass it off to the dollar store and they sell it for cheap. So capitalism is going to die because it's going to commit suicide. Greed has no limits. And because of that, capitalism will kill itself.